Indubitably. Yes. Welcome, immortals. Welcome, everyone, to another themed episode. We're up to 194 now.
Yeah.
Ho.
They roll on.
They're getting up there. So this one, we will be talking a little bit about wisdom, and we're centering this conversation based on the podcast episode of Naval Ravikant's How to Get Rich, which is a very provocative title.
Yeah, very provocative.
There's actually a lot of wisdom in there. So I'll be talking...
Also, interesting that if people went to listen to it, you could either listen to the 3-hour portion or the one that he broke down into the very, very all minutia different ones that he also produced for audio and a couple of other places.
Yeah. So there is like it's however long it is, 3.5 hours, or you can listen to them in individual snippets. Either way, it's still 3.5 hours. So there you go. I'll be talking a little bit about I suppose the way I wanted to do it was just talk about the individual sections. So more those little ones that he came up with. And then maybe a little bit about the overall sort of arching themes. So for me, the overarching themes were stuff to do with game theory, long-term games, other games, playing stupid games, not wasting your time, and specific knowledge. So
right, okay.
Those sort of things.
Yeah, a couple of the notes I took was the escaping competition through authenticity, the being too busy to do coffee, like that one, the aspirational hourly rate, take accountability to earn equity. But I did also have play long-term games with long-term people. Yeah. That long-term view.
Nice. Yep. Cool. All right. So let's jump into the definition of wisdom.
Okay.
What is wisdom? And I tried looking up a couple of different things. It was kind of hard to tell. This is another one of those ones where it's like, it can be many different things. So some say it's the right use of knowledge. I quite like that one. So not only having knowledge, but actually using it practically. So in enacting it in the world. Naval, actually, when you hear him speaking, a lot of the stuff he says is like, no, game theory is nice, but I'd never read a book on it. I learned all this via interacting with people, doing stuff in the business world, and then learning the names for these things afterwards, but I already learnt them, that sort of thing. There's another one, and a lot of it was sort of like knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, insight, unbiased judgment, compassion, experiential self-knowledge, self-transcendence, I like that, non-attachment, and virtues of ethics and benevolence. So, man, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Naval in himself, actually, in the podcast says, what is wisdom to him? Like, what's the definition? His was knowing the long-term consequences of your actions. So having the ability to look into the future and sort of predict, see what's going to happen.
As that being wisdom.
That's what wisdom was for him. That's what he said. Yeah. So that is a little bit different from all the other stuff. I like the right use of knowledge.
The right use of knowledge.
Yeah. Having knowledge and then being able to use it.
Yeah, I think it's got to be something to do with the using it, the act of doing something with the information to become wisdom. I think we've talked about this before, where it's, you have information and you can have knowledge, but then for it to be true wisdom, like you have to act it out. Yeah. No matter if someone tells you it or you read it or whatever else, until you actually are able to act it, or at least break it down into how you would act it out in that's like sort of step by step, or going through it either mentally or whatever it may be, to go like, oh yes, that's what it actually means. Because I don't know, some random one would be, I don't know, someone teaches how to throw a ball, and maybe you could go through the sequences even in your head, but essentially you actually throw the ball and feel everything that, you just don't know that's there, all the unknowns of the unknowns. Then it's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm wiser because of this has happened. You wouldn't be like you're informed, they tell you, but you're wise when it acts out.
For sure. Very good. All right. So I suppose a little bit of knowledge about why I chose this one as well. Yeah. Like I said, there's all the ones I've been picking are ones that I've listened to in the past, and I've just been like, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff in here. And it has an impact on me that I can't describe. It's can't particularly say like what it is about this that I found really, really useful or intriguing, or I just know that I get this feeling in the moment where it's like, whoa, fuck.
Yeah, this
crazy.
Is something, yeah.
That's crazy. So there's what I took out from this podcast was wisdom, because I think Naval is actually a quite a wise man from listening to him. And so let's just jump into it. So one of the first ones I jumped out was seek wealth, not money or status. And so this is talking about zero-sum games. And these seem to be like the worst of that, bring out the worst of human nature, I guess. And he talked a lot about not doing stuff that would be like the worst for you, or do sort of stupid things, in essence, like getting yourself caught up in stupid games. Another one which was I didn't write it down here, but it was like, yeah, play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yes,
I love that. I don't know if that's his quote, but I love that quote.
He did have it in there. I don't think it's his quote. It's from like someone else.
He said it at least twice, probably 3 times. So I was like, oh, yeah, he actually talks about this. So can humanity ever escape the resource trap? So that's fighting over resources. Do you think we'll ever be able to get out of that?
No, I don't think we'll ever be able to get out of that. I mean, I see purely by nature of like everything historically that we've done, why has that never happened up until this point? Like what makes us so special and so divine in nature that we're going to sort it out in our generation? I don't see that. Future, I don't even think so either. Because unless every single individual is aligned in the exact same way for the exact same things and the resources can be split very equally, I just don't see that occurring.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we'll ever get to a point where we have enough, and so having more, just we all find out, having more stuff actually doesn't help in whatever sense that we're fighting for. So obviously now you can look at the third world countries and stuff and say, okay, well, they need resources, obviously, like they're living in poverty and whatnot. Me, I would say, yeah, there's still some things that'd be nice for me to have, but do I actually really need them for myself, or more can they be like rented, for example? So could we ever create an economy where it's just like a renting sort of thing? I get the super yacht for a day or that sort of stuff. Like I wouldn't need a super yacht for a week, for example. Like that's too much for me. But maybe for a day, that could be fun. So I'm just wondering if in the future, let's just say, humanity's population balances out, seems to still be going up, but if all the other African countries sort of emulate what the West does, which is get enough resources and then it's like birth rates just plummet, there might be a point where we have enough people on planet Earth, like we peaked at people, and then we can use our resources, and there's not even assuming getting resources from asteroids and other places like that.
Yeah, there was another, I don't know who was talking about, it might have been Bjorn, but it's talking about how actually you can see how more population actually creates more wealth holistically across everybody. Like that's just things. So actually plateauing individuals will halt wealth accumulation to a particular point and distribution. But even beyond that, even if every single person was to the right level of wealth, I still think we would all be fighting for resources anyways. Because I see it now, like, you're talking about developing countries where you can definitely see like they need resources for whatever it may be. But just as much, there's billionaires out there who are still fighting for resources in the very same thing, playing in different levels and different games, but still fighting for resources.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that billionaire mindset the normal mindset for humans? Would every human want that billionaire? And what is it about the billionaires that is it really the resources that they want, or is it the status of being a billionaire? And so this was getting into the seeking wealth, not money or status. So wealth for Naval was freedom. He used, having money as being able to use freedom. And I definitely jump onto that as well. I want money, but I only want money for the purpose of freedom. I don't want money for money's sake. Like money is just numbers in a bank account, or having some, houses and resources. Yeah, that's nice,
exactly.
But, so yeah, I found that one a really big point, and that's his whole how to get rich. You're like, oh, get rich. I want to get money. And he's like, no. It's about wealth. It's not particularly about the money side of it. Money is useful, but money is used for other things. Yeah,
it's always an interesting conversation, and I think that then dives down to like each particular individual what you make wealth is. Because I see it that way too. It's like, okay, well, I want to be wealthy to the point of flexibility and flexibility to do whatever you want. But I think other people might maybe they'll think about it, and this is the difference between being wise about it and being knowledgeable about it. Because you might hear, well, if you had lots of money, or if you made lots of money of cryptocurrency or something, then you could retire and just chill out and do nothing. So
yeah, how boring would that be though?
Exactly. So yesterday actually, on the way home, right on the Uber ride, I met this guy called David. He was an old guy. I started having a conversation with him, and basically, why he was doing Uber driving, etc. A little bit about his backstory, and he essentially has been working all his life like for himself. Ran a couple of businesses. His last business was in printing, like book printing and page printing, and was doing like $2 million annual turnover. He had 27 employees, so he was doing like well for himself. Then retired, and in essence was like just bored. Right? He did all the normal things, like he traveled. Okay. He when he had good food, okay. He watched some sports, okay. And he was like, well, now what? And he basically just started Ubering because he was bored and he just wanted to do something else and start talking with people. And he actually was telling me like, oh, well, his next plan is manufacturing. And he wanted to make something like 1 million of something. He wants to manufacture and get into that. So I think when people think of sometimes wealth and they even think of flexibility, they still don't truly go down to like being wise about it. Sometimes not until you act it out, but that's where I struggle with sometimes people saying, oh, it's flexibility. So it's like, oh, it's flexibility for what? Right? So I think people like free time so I can do whatever I want. And that's all good and well. But I think sometimes people will get there and go, oh, well, what does that mean? I still don't know. Like you have no goal or no aspiration to go and do something, which I think can be concerning. And it's I don't know if you've heard this as well, where they say, you know, if you think that you'd enjoy like living on an island, that's what you're going to do, retire or just live on the beach. Don't wait till you try. Just go do that for a week and just see exactly how it feels. And then you'll go like, oh, yes, I do want to do this. Or be like, okay, I'm happy, but actually I want to go back and do something else.
Yeah. That island one is always weird because I've been on islands, man. I've been on like islands in Colombia and Mexico, and it's okay.
It's
but,
fun
man,
for the time. Would you really like to live there the whole time?
I was bored there after 3 days. I was like, yeah, this is enough. You know, beautiful sunsets. That's cool. But I mean, sand, man. Who wants sand in there?
But again, I think the whole point of that whole podcast, which is always good, is it's moving away from the status, so the game of status and money, because you will never win that game. Like you will eternally lose that game. And if you put yourself in a position to compare yourself to the hierarchy of society to go like, well, oh, money. Okay, well, you're now number 89 on the list. They're going to be 88 and 87 and 86. And that's both playing into the status. And so you're putting your position in the world into the usual hierarchy that exists, but you're denoting yourself and your self-worth and being like, oh, well, that's what I am. This is where I am. Where I think Naval's view of, okay, well, when it's wealth, you still sit in the structure of the hierarchy, but it's not dependent on who you are as a human being and how you're living, because you're just doing it for whatever purpose it is. So
I would actually love to know about the top 100. How much, because I have a feeling that the top 100 wealthiest people, not many of them are actually playing the status and money, the status game for money. I have a feeling like you can't get that wealthy by just playing that one, and like motivation runs out. I think you need to have other. Yeah, you do. There's other motivations. So but that being said, there probably are a couple of people in that list who are like looking at that list, Forbes list every day and being like, what the fuck? Like, oh, I didn't invest in Dogecoin. Now Elon Musk jumped ahead of me or some shit. So that'd be interesting. You talked about escaping competition through authenticity, didn't you? That was one of your ones. Yep. So let's jump onto that. So what was the main learning you got from that? What was your
well, it was more, and again, it was almost what we were talking about this, when you focus on the games of status and money, I think you take yourself away from the authenticity factor because you're just trying to be almost in the grand scheme of things how everyone else is playing, where when you focus on wealth, or at least that to me sounds like, okay, well, you're focusing on wealth, but you're also focusing on just you yourself as that particular being, and then being more authentic to whatever it is that you want to do. And then that is what ultimately will differentiate you from anybody else, because it's very hard for other people to just be you. So I think that to me, I was like, okay, I found that really interesting, where the more authentic you can be, even though it sounds like, oh, well, there's like the proven path of how someone else made it to success. It can be a little bit of a tricky sort of view where you go, oh, well, maybe I should just do exactly that. But I feel like I've experienced and I've seen other people where the more authentic that they tend to be, the more that ends up being in the long run the reason for their success. Kind of like, let's go Gary Vee. I think a lot of Gary Vee, when you looked back at, say, in 1995, when he very, very first was like, oh, I'm going to get into the wine business. Right? I'm going to get into some wine, and then I'm going to create a digital wine channel. And he was just trying to be authentic in the fact that he enjoys that sort of stuff. He didn't come from business, but he just had this mindset where I want to go and do this. And everybody pretty much laughed at him, being like, no, you can't do that. You're dumb. And he was authentic enough that in the long term, then he was successful. But in the short term, he would have been like, oh, well, see, I told you, this dude's going totally crap. So I think in the end, I think authenticity can win out in that long term. It's got to be okay with it in the short term.
Yeah. For me, authenticity is a weird word. I heard someone else talking about this on a podcast where they're saying it's sort of becoming abused nowadays a little bit. It's almost, how's a way, if there was a real easy way of proving that you are telling the truth,
Oh yeah, then I'd be like, no, they're not authentic.
Yeah.
Like, if you have to spell it out, I'd be like, no. I'd agree with that.
What I did like about this one though was escaping competition, and so that was the most important part for me in that. Through the authenticity, that's cool, but the goal is to escape competition, and I think that's actually just useful in general terms. And competition's fun in certain places, like sport when it's artificially created, but if you're living in that space all the time, if you're always competing against someone, I just imagine that's really draining. I've never particularly tried it myself.
See, this is an interesting one, because it can go a couple of ways. So do you think that escaping competition, so where would you then land?
Just doing your own thing, like you're living living in the moment, doing what it is that you're meant to be doing, that you really enjoy, that you find passionate. So I would say, if you're competing to, and it's sort of like the comparison game as well. If you're competing to get the best Instagram, if you're competing to do, have the best life, if you can be even in that sense, like, oh yeah, I'm competing to get the best life. I want to have like the most joy. I want to beat everyone else. I want to have the best life. Yeah. It's sort of like you're missing the point. You just want to have that. You don't need to compete against people for that. So
yeah, I think it's I don't like the term escaping competition from Naval. I think, or whether, whereas Naval was talking about it, that I like the authenticity point, but I think some people can get misguided on the escaping competition to think that, oh, well, it means you're not competing at all entirely. And then taking that to mean that then you don't participate in the competitions of everyday life.
Okay. What are some everyday life competitions?
Well, so this is where I was here, where I kind of took that as, okay, well, you should be authentic, but then still participate in the competitions that exist in everyday life, but not be affected by the fact that it's a competition in the way that you would be if it's like, oh, I've got to achieve to get to this.
Okay.
So
once again, what's a everyday life competition?
So let's say if you are running a race.
Okay.
100-meter race, Olympic gold medal sort of like type race, right? So if you're being authentic, but to escape competition,
I wouldn't say that's everyday life though. Like, okay. I'm like that. Like, these are those artificial ones that we create. I'm going to enter a race.
Let's say you're running a business for selling books.
Okay.
And let's say there's 10 other businesses. Now, you could be authentic and be whatever the hell you want to do. Let's just say you're like, oh, well, I really like the color pink, and I like the letters to be white, and I want it to have this content. Awesome. But you're still selling books, and you're still in the competition of selling books with these other 10 businesses. And I think I want it to be like very, because when I read that, I was like, oh, and I listened to it, I kind of feel like to say that you're authentic and to escape competition, I would try, and I don't know what the word is, but say it in a different way, because you're still in the competition of selling books, but you're just being authentic. And so by virtue of that, you're just doing what you enjoy. And in the competition, you're just achieving whatever it is that you're going to be achieve. But it's silly to say you're not in the competition, because you still are. It's just you don't care about it.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he was trying to get across though. Because I feel like the whole point of that one was to escape it. Like, there's competition. Yes, it's great if you're doing it in that space. Compete your heart out. You don't need to be authentic to compete. So I was my feeling was like his whole point there was saying, there's plenty of games that you're playing in which you probably don't need to play in, and which are silly, and so just escape them and as much as you can. I'll take the podcast for example. I could be competing against other people in this. I could be saying, I want to be the best Australian podcast. I want to have the most numbers. I want to have the most reach, all those sorts of things. But if I'm doing that, then I would sort of be saying like, okay, a strategy to do that is to make sure other people don't get stuff. So I could talk shit about them. I could redirect them.
That's just the strategy behind it, right? Like, you still see, and this is, and I think it's just the word competition that brings it to me, because if I go, say you're running a podcast and you want to be number one, like you're like, oh, I'm going to be authentic, like I'm doing it because I love it, blah, blah, and I want to be number one. So I want to strategize towards like, how can I grow it bigger? How can I be better? Now, whether you define it as I want to be number one, or you define like I want to be bigger, bigger. I want to reach more people. You're in that competition.
No. I think that's quite different. I think that's quite different.
Okay.
I think wanting to be better is not the same as wanting to be a certain place or wanting to be number one. I think it's totally okay to be better, but you don't need to be better in that space with the mindset of being better to be better than other people. You can be better to be, I guess it's competition with yourself if you really want to put it that way.
Yeah, but I just think I still see it in when you say better, it's like better against what?
Yourself. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Anywho, that might be just one way we're looking at things a little bit differently. I'll jump onto make luck your destiny. So
make luck your destiny.
He talked a little bit about the different types of luck. And I thought it was pretty interesting that he had so many different ones. I'd never particularly thought of luck I think I'd heard of, there's blind luck and you can sort of create your luck, but he had 4 different types. I'm going to try I didn't actually write it down. There was the, pure just chance luck. There was the hustle luck, which is you're creating your own luck through meeting more people by putting yourself more out there.
The serendipity of just being able to find more things because you're doing more things.
Yeah. And then he had 2 others, and then like he was saying you want the other 2 types of luck. Now I'm actually completely forgetting what they are. They're quite different. If you get onto that one,
okay.
have a look at it.
Look at those other 2.
And he was saying, so I'm just reading my note here, as close as I will come to manifesting would be like, can you be lucky across 10, 20, 30 different fields? So with the manifestation, that was probably the closest I'd come to believe in, like manifesting something, which is putting yourself out enough and doing things so that you run out of unluck as well. Because he was talking about, there's all these sort of situations where you just get unlucky. So if you use up all your unlock, then luck will sort of come to you. So another like just way of flipping something on your head where I thought like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool way of looking at it. Anything jump out of you from the luck one?
Oh, I'd say I'd be careful with how the way some of Naval structured that, because I feel like there's some survivorship bias there with Naval in saying a lot of that, where I agree definitely that the more you aim at things, probably the more lucky you're going to be, and the more you can hustle and the more you can do serendipity amount of items, that'd be fantastic. In saying that, when you listen to a lot of these people or others who have reached success, like really, really good success, you don't see probably the 98% of other people who did the same thing and failed, like who were exact same human being and failed completely. So when I take that, I go, okay, I agree. There's got to be obviously a part of luck, and the harder you work, sometimes it does help in the luck that you find, just because you might go like, oh, I met that person when I was doing all these coffee runs and helping out people, and so you know me and it helps me, and then all of a sudden we make a business, etc. Like that can be a lucky by chance by the fact that you are getting yourself out more, whether it's networking, or knowing people, or being nicer. But it's not a given. Like I wouldn't say that is a definitive reason for you creating your own luck, and then the success will just roll on in.
Yeah. Cool. All right, bring up one of yours. Well, I'll see if I can quickly.
I'll find the other 2 lucks. Yeah. So one of the ones that I noted down was be too busy to do coffee. Be too busy to do coffee.
Because coffee's shit.
Yeah.
Don't drink that stuff.
But this was just like what I just took out of that. A little bit, I guess, related to that luck point is just be doing a lot of things. Be interactive in a lot of different spaces, to the point that you're too busy, and I'd probably move away from the word busy, but too productive or working at higher item priorities, that coffee is just not in a priority list. Like you just cannot spend other time in your day to go like, oh, well, I've got the opportunity to just go and have this coffee conversation. Now, be in a position where you're productively, whether it's with yourself, with the things that you're doing to become wealthy, be so engaged in them that's just not something that comes up, at least for the purpose of, let's go have a coffee and chat. No, if there's a purpose behind the coffee conversation, like to do deals or, you're networking or whatever, okay. But for the pure conversation of just like relaxing, I guess you could replace that with bit too busy to like flick through TikTok. Just be productive enough that you're continuing in that progression, as opposed to just stalling or even reversing.
Yeah, I think that one's pernicious, because it's one of those ones where it feels like you're doing something. I'm networking.
Yeah,
I'm
you're doing something.
Yeah, but it's
being busy is not productive.
Exactly. One of the things he also mentioned was, if someone wants to have a meeting with you, can it be done in a phone call? If they want to have a phone call with you, can it be done in an email? If they want to email you, can it be done via text? And if they're texting you, well, it's probably not important, so you can fuck them off. So that's sort of like trying to get people, especially when you're at his level, which would be, so many people inundating him with stuff. You want to be downgrading stuff as much as you can and saying like, hey, get this into like the shortest format possible, and then we can go from there. The 4 types of luck. So I've just brought it up here, and I've got a bloody pop-up. Why do people still use pop-ups, man?
Pop-ups.
That is not wisdom. So there's the first number 1 is blind luck. There's the luck that comes to you through persistence. So that's what we talked about. Fortune favors the bold. Spotted luck. So chance favors the prepared mind. So that was where, I think it was like creating the mindset so that you can recognize luck when it appears as well. So it's not just, luck hitting you in the face. It's sort of you being able to maybe search it out in a way. And the 4th was luck that finds you, question mark. And I can't remember what that one actually is, so it doesn't help. Anyway, all right, very good.
4 types. Okay. What was one of the other ones?
So the foundations. So foundations of what he recommends. And his were foundations are math and logic. So this was one I thought that might be interesting to get your point on, was the reading. And he totally advocates reading. He was saying basically all the people he knows who are up in that, stratospheric level of success, however you want to define it, or wealth, all of them read tons. And what were your thoughts on that? Were you going like, Naval, you don't know shit, mate?
I mean, I totally agree, but I think the point to take out of that, is it because they're reading, or is it because they've got like a level of discipline to apply to something, and then in turn they've got that level of discipline to apply somewhere else, or is it something else entirely, right?
No, I think it was the reading, because otherwise he would have said it was, discipline to do something.
Is it though? I didn't get that from him when he was saying it. When he said that, he was like, from the reading, but he didn't specifically say, so then that reading, the knowledge you take that out, was what then achieved wealth.
Yeah, but he didn't say discipline either. He was saying reading.
Well, that's what I mean. I think a lot of people can say, it's because of this. But is it truly because of that? Or is there like a fundamental, skill or character trait that those people then, display that help out in that?
Yeah, well, that's a different question. But
I took it with me as, sure, yeah, you can, but you could say the same thing about many other things.
That's what an ignorant fool would say who doesn't read. What about reinforcing the basics then? So his basics there were math and logic, and he also mentioned coding, which you were talking to me recently about as well. I'm probably still not going to learn code. I just don't see how. Give me an example of when you've used code recently, actually.
Recently reading code, and at the very least doing transfers overs from like a MetaMask NFT, moving Ethereum back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had to write code to do that?
You had to use code, basically. You had to like use your key to shift it over somewhere else, and then run some sort of script to get it over.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're not writing code.
Yeah.
But you've got an idea of like what is happening in there at the very least, to know like, I'm doing this the right way.
Okay.
Not like complete blind.
Sending your money random places.
Apart from that though, no, like no other places where I've actively coded.
Yeah, gotcha. And what about the basics? What did you think? Math and logic, are those the core things that you think we should be focusing on?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think I could add to them, but math and logic seem like completely reasonable.
Yeah, and so he was talking a lot about going to the foundations of something. So if you want to learn about money, you should go Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. If you want to learn about evolutionary theory, don't read like the latest random book that's most popular now. Go back to Charles Darwin, that sort of stuff. Do you think that sort of going back to the real fundamentals, the classics almost, is that something that you particularly try and do in your day-to-day life? If you want to learn about code, for example, would you want to learn about the latest greatest thing, or would it be better to go back to who sort of invented the first sort of coding platform? What was one of the very first basic programs that you could use.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think both of those things are wrong. I'd probably go a third one, which is you'd probably go with the new while learning the principles that are derived from the initial beginning. So I think you'd have to get a bit of both. Like I think it would say with the coding, yeah, there's no way you'd go back to the original because it's just almost obsolete to today's like usage. But you would want to know
in terms of though the principles that you get from that, like they would have been using like the very first, I don't know, repeating scripts or something like that.
Like you would want to know some of the principles behind like just say like C# or the way that you would structure a, you know, whether you're doing front end or you're doing service calls or APIs. Yes, there's fundamentals that exist the whole time. So you want to learn those principles. Whether you learn that from the old information or new information, I'd probably say newer information is better in that case because it's more refined. It has more information from history that's been learned. And then you would go from today's world forward just because it's shifting so much. Now, I would go in the more knowledge space. So where like, you know, would you go back to the principles of just say, I don't know, take any fundamental knowledge, whether it's like Wealth of Nations or something like that. Would you go back to that or read something new? It's interesting because I would yearn towards going to the new because information should be built on, you know, on the top of, you know, from the shoulders of giants. So they should be using some of those really key fundamental books, whether Wealth of Nations or other books or other information sources, to then kind of refine it even better and then add more on top. But I think it's hard to find.
Yeah,
I think that's the hard problem. It's like that should happen. And if it did, I would say definitely go with the latest and greatest. But I think that sometimes the fact that some of those fundamentals either might get missed or get interpreted through other filters that you yourself probably should go and check on first to then not have those like lens go through it to you. Like you can see it just absolutely raw, see the information. What it makes me think is Gulag Archipelagos. I think with that book, if someone had written a summary of it and then someone else had written a summary of that summary and you read that summary, you would get the intent or the content, but I think you would miss a lot of things that you yourself personally would have gotten if you read the original.
Yeah. You probably should have used an example of a book you've read.
Yeah, well, like for me, it would be
like Treasure Island or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I guess Treasure Island in comparison to. I'm just trying to think of what's a comparison that's like a summarized version. I just don't have like it's like a
like just a random, you know.
Oh no, here's a good one. I read a book called The String Theory. It's called String Theory Universe, and there was another one that I read. It was around mathematics, right? So I read those books. It was like years ago, and I read them, and I really enjoyed them. They were really, really mathematical, but they described things really, really quite well. But I think I would have taken more if I'd gone and done some pre-research or known about some of the fundamentals of where some of this stuff began. And then I would have probably had more wisdom coming out of that than just reading those summarized, noted books.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the problem, because I just read so much, I have to have almost a mix of new and old, like they just seep in. What I've noticed from the new ones is, one, they can sometimes follow trends. So it's like the trend of the day. It's the trend of this topic is, you know, super interesting or whatnot, which is okay. And then, you know, so much of the new science is just so new that it hasn't had time to be refuted yet or to be gone away. So I'm talking more about non-fiction here rather than fiction. I don't read much, you know, fiction that was published in the last 20 years. The other one is there's a how would I put it? It's wanting to like get, so there's the trend part, which is that's you, the author, I suppose, trying to ride a wave. The other is the fundamentals. Just I have a feeling like there's some things that time itself just gets rid of or makes important, and so there's that once again that sort of like it gives time for bullshit to be gotten rid of, in essence. So you might think this book is really good, and then, you know, are you actually going to remember it in 10 years, 20 years time? Maybe not. And I just take, you know, I watch other people as well. So like Tim Ferriss was saying, I'm not reading any books that were published in the last year. Yeah, that makes me think like, oh, okay, there's probably a reason why he's doing that. he might have different reasons from what I would be. But I would just say like the classics though, those are more of those books stick in my mind than more of the recent books that I've read. That's for sure.
I think, I'd say broadly that could be true.
Yeah. Coolies. I think the only other one was I had with accountability. So accountability means letting people criticize you. And I thought that one was kind of funny because he was saying like he didn't particularly want to be on Twitter and enjoy it for the amount of people who would give him shit on there. But he felt he was saying so much about accountability was, if you're wanting to do big things and use leverage, so many other things about creating wealth was using leverage. So whether that was capital or labor or through the like reproducing means. So essentially like low cost things such as coding or using internet or video or audio to mass put stuff out. He was saying like you have to remember like there's accountability. You got to use your reputation there. So if you're using your reputation to get those things to be able to leverage, it's a double-edged sword because you've now got accountability to maintaining that reputation, making sure that you're not saying stupid things or putting out stupid recommendations because other people are watching like all the time. What do you think about reputation? Is it still important nowadays?
I did note that I had that as well. Take accountability to earn, I guess, a reputation and also equity. So I even took it. I think we was taking it even further as well with the, taking the equity of being whether it's socially acceptable. To make sure that you're doing the right things. And once you start spreading a field and doing all these different things, and you're seen everywhere. So you're expected that reputation carries across everywhere. So if you promise like, oh yeah, everything I do, I deliver 100%. Then you put your name against some random code that some third party provider's doing and it breaks, then people are going to be like, oh, this person's not holding a reputation. So I think it still holds true in terms of like even more nowadays because you could just digitally able to expand so much so people expect so much of you everywhere.
Yeah. Do you think there's one thing I've just been pondering in my mind for a while. Is there a difference between would you separate your online reputation versus your in-person reputation? Like, is it possible to have multiple reputations or is there just one?
I think there's many, many ways to have like different reputation levels. Almost like when people say like the different people online versus not online. And maybe you don't see all the people online that see you in person. So you can definitely have two different reputations. Maybe everyone thinks like, oh, you're such an angry person. And like whenever you interact with him, he's always angry. But online, you're like, oh, it's totally fine and you're happy.
Okay, I think that's the opposite way, man. I think most people are like, chilled out in person.
Or the opposite way, like whichever it is.
That would be the more common one.
But so I think that can definitely occur. I would err towards like, just try to have the same reputation broadly everywhere.
Yeah, okay, that's
just because life would be easier.
That's what you try and do?
Yeah, just because life would be easier. I remember actually many, I've talked about this in many podcasts ago, but on Instagram that I would used to be able to post and be like, no, I want to post so it's like gets lots of likes, so it can get comments, or it can be viewed and whatnot. And then slowly transferred over to like, oh, now likes have gone away. That I don't really care. And now I like post purely for the exact same way. Maybe I would be showing someone to something, and the way I write, it's just the exact same way. It's like there's no care. It goes back to like that original point of, to me, it's like I'm being authentic. But I'm not playing the game. I'm in the competition of posting, let's just say, but I just do not care into the point of like whether it's just appeasing this person or does it look this way? No, like that's exactly my personality in that post. Yeah. So it would be like the same reputation than in person.
Yeah, it's a weird one there because you're trying to be as authentic as possible, let's say, but let's say you're obsessed with, weird body malformations or something, like photos of that. If you showed that to people in person, most people are going to be like, why are you showing me this crap? I don't want to see this crap. Like, this is disgusting. Yeah. But if you're doing it online, you don't get that feedback of people saying, well, maybe you do, of like, this is gross. I don't want to see that. Yeah, I think you would. It's true. It's true. Maybe it wouldn't hurt as much though, because it'd be like, oh, they're haters. Like, they don't know shit. Like, that sort of being able to justify it. So I think there is a slight value in wanting to have positive interactions online as well, and not just oh, I'm super authentic and do everything, and then you like create the worst art ever seen by humanity.
Yeah.
And you just continue to do it because that's authentic. Yeah. Okay,
Well,
maybe.
that's I mean, just on the content that people post online, I think sometimes when someone like replies back and be like, oh, like this is not acceptable or this is crap, but they've got some real reason behind it, and maybe, you know, this could be noted because of this. That's still a positive comment. Like that is a positive comment. If they're coming back and saying like, you know, this doesn't belong here because of X, or you could have done this better because of Y. That's a positive comment because it could be, you could either, there's two ways you can take it. You could take it in the way of like, oh yes, I've done something wrong, or I've learned here by something positive, or I gotta say that's positive, or you can take it as neutral and be like, okay, well that's a point of view, cool, nothing to do with it. But like, there's no need at that point to take it negative.
I think intention matters. I think if someone's
like the intention matters. Like if the intention's good, whatever the comment comes, it can be positive or neutral. I just wouldn't say it as negative. Yeah, if the intent comes that they're trying to hurt or bring people down, then okay, well, just
and that's harder online because it's
hard to see that.
You don't get all that stuff. Do you have any more points to bring up?
No, I mean the other one that we've already talked about, which was the playing long-term games with. We haven't really talked about it, but I'll just quickly touch on it. The playing long-term games with long-term people.
Yeah.
So just simply, and he talked about this a lot with long-term games, but just being involved with people who you're either doing deals with or who you're working with who are not looking at it from a short-term view. Because short-term, you can only get so much. You can only get so much tactical wins where you need to sometimes plan out things that are long-term and being okay to riding the ups and downs no matter what for it to go through. So I think, I don't know, a random example would be if you partnered up with someone else and said, you know, in 2011, like, oh, we're going to create a place where you can buy and sell Bitcoin and it's going to be great and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, and it starts going up and down. And Bitcoin went through a period once where it like went all the way down to 0.01 cents and then held it for ages. And then it kind of like went up and down for ages. People want to be like, nah, okay, I'm out. Like, I'm not, you know, but if you're playing a long-term game, like, that doesn't matter. Like, we believe in this, it's going to go well. Look at it 10 years from now, et cetera, et cetera. And then you would land wherever it is that you would land. So I think similarly, I like that we're finding more people to interact that want to play the long-term too, rather than just, because if you're talking with someone and they're playing short-term and you're playing long-term, like it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Like that conversation, talking about things like with NFTs and Gary V's potential cards, like there's a reason I'm thinking about buying them is because I'm looking at it in a very long-term view. And Gary's looking at it in he's looking at a 45-year view. So I'm like, oh, damn. But if you tell someone that those NFT cards and what they do in the short term, like 6 months, they'll be like, well, the hell, this makes no sense. Like you get nothing for it. It's just a picture. Nothing, like you can't do anything until 2022. So the conversation there is completely different. So finding those people who can see the long term, I think it is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One takeaway I got. So I'll take this into, I think, my learnings from this, my takeaways as well. And so wisdom, as we said, is about not only having the knowledge but using it. So
yes.
I want to actually try and put some of these things into practice. So you were talking just then about long-term games. So one of mine is play long-term games with short-term iterations though. And he was pretty clear on you want to be iterating as much as you can in the short term with whatever it is you're doing so that you can filter out quickly the bullshit stuff that's not helping. And I think there's a bunch of ways that I should start implementing that in, I think quite a few things that I'm doing. So number one is for the podcast, iterations with the banners and like the click-through things of like for so long we've had the very same stuff. We've had the very same Mere Mortals logo. We've had the very same thumbnail pictures for the book reviews. We've had all these sorts of things. So I want to start iterating those a lot more because they are actually important to the YouTube algorithm and all that sort of stuff. And I have a lot of fun doing the really silly ones as well. So I want to do more of that. So it's like doing that. Same with exercise, for example. I do so many handstands, but it's been a long time since I've recorded videos of them. And that's one thing I see Brendan doing all the time. He's always taking videos. And so he's always getting that in the moment feedback essentially of, I can see like my hips aren't in this particular angle. I'm sort of doing this thing slightly weird. So I'm going to start taking more videos as well. And there's a couple other ways I'm sort of thinking of things, such as going to more events, more different types of like meetup events and really trying out a whole bunch of them in a rapid succession rather than becoming really familiar with one. So yeah, so lots of little different things there. Any thoughts on that? Short-term,
No, nothing more for me.
Do you want to do the same thing, or should I just go through my whole list of stuff I'm going to try and implement?
Go through your whole list.
All right. So he talked a shit ton about game theory. I've had like 5 books on game theory in my phone that I just haven't got around to for a while. So bump a couple of those up. Don't waste your time learning things you hate and practicing skills that don't suit your innate talents. I think there's a couple of things I'm still doing which I feel like are necessary, but maybe I can get rid of them. Maybe I can get rid of some of the editing stuff and either push that on to other people, or maybe it just doesn't matter that much. I haven't checked for a while. Maybe I should check that and see, does this thing actually matter, or is it just me doing something stupid because I'm used to doing it?
Yep.
And yeah, practicing skills that don't suit your innate talents. I think there might be a couple of things I'm still doing which are like, maybe running.
Don't need to practice it. Yeah.
Don't need to practice running. Like that's not an innate talent. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I think just thinking about that as a whole is useful. As what games am I playing in? What competition do I think I'm not playing in? Perhaps that I'm being a bit blindsided by that I actually am. I'd say maybe the metric sort of stuff. I've got a way better handle on it than I used to, but I think there's still maybe a little bit in the back of my mind being like, looking at the metrics for this, looking at the metrics for that. Figuring out your specific knowledge. I think trying to write down what my specific knowledge is. So we glossed over this, but another thing that really came out from this podcast was specific knowledge is something that basically only you know and only that you can really communicate effectively. I think there's a couple of things that I might have. This might be related to what would our book be about? Maybe I should actually think okay, seriously, if I was going to write a book,
what would you fill it with?
What would it be full of? And reputation plus accountability times leverage equals wealth. So that was his, I suppose, general formula that I took out. So think about reputation, think about accountability, and then multiply that by the leverage. And that's what gets you wealth. And then I think the meta to all of this, and he talked about this right at the end, was all of these things, it's all just basically to have good relationships, good mental health, good physical health. So always keep that in mind. Always have that in the back.
Definitely. I mean, if you don't have any of those 3, it's going to be hard pressed to go and do any of these things we've been talking about.
Yeah, for sure. That was like his. He was saying, if you are, what's the one thing that actually I didn't take it from this. I think I took it from somewhere else, but it was the healthy man wants 100 things. The unhealthy man wants only one thing, and that's just health. So other than that, maybe we should do our mere mortal
moment.
Mine is, you might not know when you got it, but others certainly will. So there's talking about wisdom. I think if you're the person in the moment dispensing the wisdom, if you're doing it right, I don't think you'll be thinking man, I'm dropping wisdom bombs right now. I think it'll just be I'm sharing my view. But I think from the outside, when you're looking at other people, you can say, okay, this guy's got some wisdom. He's saying some stuff that makes, real. It's the truest sense of what it can be.
Yep. I like it. Escape the competition by being yourself for the long term. So
he's combining everything.
Yeah. I like this, that whole take on, escape competition by just being who you are, authentic for the long term. Just playing that out of being whoever you are. And that can be tricky because it's almost like you need some precursor of, you need to put in the work to know who you are and what you want to do, and then live that out for the rest of your life in that way, whatever that you undertake. So, not covered really by Naval of the podcast, but I think there's something about, to be in the right emotional, physical, mental level. Yes, but there is some precursory work that you'll take to get there and then live that way for X amount of time.
Yep. So. Nice.
Cool. All right. I'll note in here as well for the next conversation.
Yes, please.
What we're going to talk about. So I had one that I really want to talk about, but I was like, no, there's something came up very recently that I was like, oh man, we've got to talk about it, which is, let me bring it up. It is episode 513 of Tim Ferriss's podcast with Sebastian Younger, or say Younger. I don't know how you say it. Younger. And we mentioned it a little bit at the start of the conversation, but we didn't get into it, which I was like, oh, that's cool, because it's all about freedom. Sometimes the definition of freedom, where you can call it into particularly the wealth, or broadly what it means, and he has an awesome definition about freedom that I don't think I'd heard anywhere else, and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. So go tune into that one before the next podcast.
Yep,
so you can be prepared with us as well, folks.
I will do that. All right. So mere mortals folks at home, what can you do to get wisdom? What is something that is possibly full of wisdom that you should be listening to all of the time, 24/7, 365? There's enough content out there that you can probably do that for, I'd say, like 3 solid months before you run out.
Easy.
It's the Mere Mortals people.
Mere Mortals podcast. That's right.
We are just mere mortals, but we are just mere mortals full of wisdom.
That's right.
Tune into any of our old episodes. If you're looking for some of the old episodes on YouTube, you have to find it in the playlists of the Mere Mortals podcast, the current new YouTube channel, still newish. Other than that, do all the good things. We really appreciate it. Tell a friend. If your friend is asking about Naval or wants to know more, send him this way.
Yeah.
We can give him
we can hook him up.
we can give him like real third-hand information about Naval.
Well, like, we're talking about the whole, like, do you want to read from the source? Nah. Come listen to us, where it's like third source down the chain, and we'll tell you something that's kind of related.
Totally
we won't
forgetting
even
about luck.
We won't even tell you the 4 luck. We just tell you 2, and we don't know what the last one even means. So that's where you learn.
That's it.
All right, Immortals, that's it. One out.
Going out.
Booey.